Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Carter Walton, a man of integrity and accuracy whose cool, collected attitude to life and business contrasted sharply with the chaotic, frequently impetuous world of the Forresters, had always been the quiet power at Forrester Creations. He had handled family conflicts, survived innumerable storms, and offered legal counsel during even the most dire company times over the years. However, nothing could have prepared him for the day that Ridge Forrester, the personification of intense ambition and erratic emotions, chose to push the boundaries too many times. During that fateful afternoon, Carter confronted Ridge in a tense and anticipated boardroom. The encounter would ultimately reshape not only Carter's identity but also the destiny of Forrester Creations. Leaning back in his leather chair and making ideas with a casual disdain for opposition, Ridge gave off his signature confidence as the meeting got underway. He spoke with the confident confidence that had protected him from criticism for so long, but tonight every word echoed with a hint of conceit that Carter could no longer stand. Carter challenged Ridge's most recent proposal, a hazardous financial move that threatened to upend the company's entire foundation, with a deep breath and unshakable resolve, interjecting with a serenity that belied the tempest raging inside him. "I understand your vision, Ridge," Carter continued quietly, his voice echoing across the quiet room, "but we cannot, in good conscience, compromise the integrity of Forrester Creations for the sake of ambition. Trust, openness, and responsibility, not careless gambles, are the foundation of our legacy." The atmosphere in the room changed at that very moment. Members of the board exchanged cautious looks as they realized that Carter's remarks were a statement of philosophy rather than just a list of grievances. Ridge responded with scathing sarcasm, his eyes flashing with disbelief and his self-assured exterior briefly breaking. "And who are you to question my judgment, Carter?" Carter's response was measured and thoughtful, each word a monument to years of commitment and the sacrifices he had made for the organization. "After all, you're only the legal counsel, always the obedient one. Ridge, I am the defender of our legacy in addition to being the legal counsel. Regardless of titles or previous relationships, I must speak truth to power when our future is at stake." As the debate heated up, the boardroom turned into a battleground for ideas and egos. While some leaned in, mesmerized by Carter's subdued opposition, Ridge's fans, who had become accustomed to his unquestioned authority, mumbled in dissatisfaction. The argument was intense and complex. Carter referred to historical precedents, recorded differences in the suggested approach, and even the moral principles that had long served as the foundation of Forrester Creations. Even some of Ridge's most ardent supporters started to doubt the feasibility of the rash plan for the first time in years as a result of his statements, which were supported by facts and experience. Carter remained composed throughout the exchange, his eyes unwavering and his voice unrelenting, as though every remark were a well-crafted weapon intended to reveal a long-ignored truth rather than inflict pain for the sake of inflicting pain. He thought back to the prior choices that had almost destroyed the business, the red flags that had been disregarded, and the results of unbridled ambition that had plagued the Forrester Creations hallways. "A significant turning point is imminent," he said, "and if we continue on this course without accountability, the consequences will be far worse than any short-term benefit. In addition to being a lawyer, I stand here having seen fortunes rise and fall in this same room." Ridge, who was clearly upset by Carter's uncompromising position, tried to change the subject by raising the question of whether Carter's fixation on procedural rigor was preventing the essential innovation. "Our legacy deserves better than shortcuts and empty promises." However, each time Ridge attempted to regain control, Carter rebutted with information, statistics, and a reminder of the values that had guided the business for many years. As the minutes stretched into an hour of heated back-and-forth conversations, the tension became evident. The power of Carter's speech left the board members reeling, torn between traditionalism and the necessity for progressive reform. The atmosphere was packed with personal history as well as professional stakes during this verbal and intellectual confrontation. Ridge's exuberant self-assurance, which had characterized their meetings over the years, stood in sharp contrast to Carter's composed opposition. A subdued undercurrent of disapproval had suddenly exploded into a full-scale challenge to the status quo. Furthermore, although Ridge's statements were intended to establish authority and control, they unintentionally brought attention to his weakness, his worry that his ambitious ideas would fail due to their own recklessness. Each board member was fully aware that the outcome of this debate would determine the direction of the company's future, and as the argument reached its peak, the room fell silent. Carter's parting words struck a deep chord. We must be willing to hold ourselves accountable if we value our legacy and if we believe in the enduring strength of this family and this company. Let this be the pivotal moment when we decide to put wisdom above impatience and integrity before ambition. I maintain my position today because I think that the only way we can create a future that respects our history is by speaking the truth. The room seemed to hold its breath at that tense moment. Ridge gazed at Carter with a mix of rage and grudging respect, his self-assured exterior starting to show. The conflict was more than just a disagreement over business strategy, it was a turning point that embodied the never-ending conflict between unbridled ambition and measured responsibility, between the necessity for cautious stewardship and the urge for quick advancement. Outside the boardroom, rumors of the fight spread across Forrester Creations and quickly reached the media, sparking contentious discussions among both industry insiders and fans. Carter's position was hailed by some as an essential check on the excesses of corporate avarice, but others saw it as a challenge to the Forrester heritage, which was founded on audacious, occasionally dangerous choices that had propelled the business to its legendary heights. However, Carter had done more than simply defend his position during that tense and unvarnished moment. He had reinterpreted what it meant to be a leader with conviction in a society where ambition and power can obfuscate morality. For him, this was more than just a career win, it was a victory over years of undervaluation and having his steadfast adherence to the company's principles called into question by people who were more concerned with immediate profits than with the company's long-term history. There was doubt at the end of the board meeting, but one thing was certain, Forrester Creations' dynamics had changed permanently. Carter's passionate defense of integrity had caused the leadership to reassess their goals, paving the way for revolutionary changes that would likely change the course of the business. Ridge's face remained composed as the dust settled, and even though he did not immediately give in, there was an obvious undercurrent of reflection in his eyes, a tacit admission that maybe, for the sake of the legacy they both held dear, change was not only necessary but also inevitable. The consequences from the boardroom altercation continued to ripple across the organization in the days that followed, igniting conversations about leadership, accountability, and the fine line between ambition and responsibility. Carter's stance had turned into a rallying cry for people who thought that real power came from having the guts to face hard realities rather than from unbridled control. Even though the future was uncertain, one thing was certain. Carter's unwavering dedication to Forrester Creations and its timeless principles had established a new benchmark for what it meant to lead with both heart and mind. This benchmark would continue to inspire and challenge anyone who dared to hope for a legacy based on more than just ambition alone in the constantly changing Bold and the Beautiful story. Within the Forrester empire, Steffi Forrester and Taylor Hayes had long represented the epitome of power and refinement, but when the tension with Brooke Logan reached a breaking point, the atmosphere was infused with a level of intensity that few had ever experienced. Every character in the room had to face the dirty truths of love, power, and treachery on that day as long-standing grudges and hidden goals clashed. The action took place in a large, bright conference room at Forrester Creations, whose sophisticated marble columns and gleaming hardwood tables silently attested to decades of commercial success and family conflict. Steffi sat at the head of the table, her posture exuding power and resolve, her stare as hard as tempered glass. Taylor had taken her customary spot at her side, across from her, her eyes gleaming with both defiance and resolution. But today, their partnership was more than just business, it was a personal bond formed in the furnace of heartache and the desire for validation. Ever the drama queen and opportunist, Brooke had shown up without warning, hoping to take advantage of the situation as she had so frequently done in the past. Instead, she discovered an uncompromising force in Steffi and Taylor, who had been quietly assembling proof of her deceit and her persistent efforts to sabotage the family's legacy for months. When Steffi broke the silence, the tension in the room was evident. With a low, measured voice that had a steel-cutting edge, she said, "Brooke, we know what you've been up to." Taylor's steely, wordless message was clear as his eyes met Brooke's. Enough is enough. Brooke had been the obstinate intruder for far too long, interfering in every choice, every discussion, and every private issue in an attempt to gain power via guile and manipulation. But today everything were reversed. "Your tactics are transparent, and we refuse to let your schemes derail what we've worked so hard to build," Steffi added calmly, her tone faltering for a moment before Brooke's confident smirk was replaced by a flash of uncertainty as she realized that the united front in front of her was far more formidable than she had expected. A change in the dynamic that went well beyond the immediate altercation began just as the verbal altercation was reaching its climax. Carter Walton, the modest but unwavering legal genius behind the Forrester empire, had been painstakingly going over documents in a different section of the building that had the potential to topple established hierarchies of power. Carter had long been Forrester Creations' moral compass due to his quiet dedication, but he had reached a breaking point in his dissatisfaction with frequent betrayals and deceptive techniques. His long-awaited confrontation with Ridge Forrester, a man whose goals, albeit brilliant, had frequently verged on recklessness, provided an outlet for his inner anguish today. Carter and Ridge's meeting was both unavoidable and therapeutic. Earlier that morning, Ridge had unveiled his most recent strategy plan, a daring, comprehensive plan aimed at concentrating power within the Forrester fold, in the quiet hallways of the executive suite. However, Carter found inconsistencies and unstated provisions in the fine print that jeopardized the family's long-standing confidence as well as the company's credibility. Carter was determined to address the matter directly, so he asked Ridge for a private meeting. The atmosphere was charged with the prospect of conflict as they entered a remote office. "We are at a crossroads," Carter said in a calm but determined tone. "Even though your strategy is grandiose, it is based on backdoor deals and half-truths." Ridge's eyes sparkled with a mix of fury and hurt. He had always taken pleasure in his creative approach, but here was Carter, questioning every choice with an unwavering devotion to ethics. "I cannot stand by while our legacy is compromised by such recklessness." The conversation swiftly became heated, with every comment acting as a catalyst for more arguments. Carter's retorts became more incisive as Ridge defended his decisions, claiming that daring actions were required in a sector that was always evolving. "Brave actions do not justify dishonesty, Ridge." Their voices raised, not just out of rage but also out of the passion of two men who both felt they were battling for the future of Forrester Creations. Leadership demands responsibility and transparency, not just gaudy headlines and bold strategic moves. The conflict between Steffi, Taylor, and Brooke intensified back in the boardroom. Steffi and Taylor had arrived with indisputable proof of Brooke's devious efforts to influence important choices in her favor. As they presented their findings, emails, texts, and private conversations, they portrayed a lady who had long taken advantage of circumstances for her personal benefit, ignoring the family's and the business's overall well-being. Desperate and cornered, Brooke attempted to intervene with pathetic denials and excuses, but the evidence was too strong. "You believe that by using charm and cunning, you can just waltz back into the conversation and make things right?" Despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins, Steffi's voice remained steady as she challenged. Taylor threw gasoline to the flames by saying, "Your tactics are nothing but smoke and mirrors, Brooke, and today, we see right through you." Her tone was authoritative, as if she had survived years of emotional upheaval and come out stronger as a result. A moment of truth that swept away all pretense and made everyone in the room face the truth of their deeds. The confrontation was unvarnished and unadulterated. The atmosphere in the building changed as the two confrontations played out in various parts of Forrester Creations. Workers were now embroiled in the crossfire of values and passions after having long been passive observers of the drama that characterized their job. The force of the discussions clearly shook the board members, who are usually used to courteous criticism. While doubters started to wonder if the traditional methods of manipulation and power struggles could really endure in this new age of accountability, whispers of support for Carter's honesty and appreciation for Steffi and Taylor's united stand spread like wildfire. Despite his trademark bluster, Ridge had to face a harsh fact: his ambitious plan for the business could not disregard the fundamental values that had established Forrester Creations as a leader in excellence. He withdrew to his office in the quiet minutes after his altercation with Carter, the sounds of their dispute still echoing in his mind. In the middle of the late afternoon bustle, Ridge struggled with the fallout from his choices. He understood that while his desire had propelled the business to new heights, it had also caused a rift with people who had previously supported him. The sad discovery served as a reminder that loyalty and trust were frequently sacrificed in the name of power. As the altercation with Brooke intensified in the boardroom, Steffi and Taylor's faces solidified into unwavering resolve. They were aware that eliminating the aspects of lying and manipulation that had long weakened the family's combined efforts was crucial for the continuation of the Forrester heritage. Their united front was more than just a personal triumph. It was a strong demand for a new era of leadership in which accountability, transparency, and respect for one another were valued above all else. The mood was electrifying, a moment captured in time where every gesture and every word had the power to change the future of the business. For her part, the intensity of the criticism left Brooke reeling. She had once been sure that she could manipulate the story with charm and subtle manipulation, but now she had to confront the harsh fact that her strategies were failing. She had limited leeway because of the unquestionable evidence in front of her and the combined weight of Taylor's and Steffi's charges. It was then that she recognized the days of unbridled ambition and clandestine plotting were coming to an end, a knowledge that both alarmed and enraged her. Wide-ranging consequences would result, including a re-evaluation of what it meant to be a member of the Forrester family, a change in power relations, and an alteration in alliances. The effects of these encounters were still being felt as the day came to an end in the corridors of Forrester Creations. Long-standing customs would be questioned, and new standards would be born out of the furnace of battle, as Carter's unyielding advocacy of moral leadership and Ridge's forced reflection on his own tactics heralded the start of a revolutionary era. The strained animosity had given way to cautious optimism in the boardroom as it became clear that change, no matter how painful, was essential to advancement. By firmly opposing Brooke's tactics, Steffi and Taylor represented the idea that honesty might triumph over dishonesty even in the most ruthless settings. The complex network of relationships and power conflicts that characterized Bold and the Beautiful had been exposed by the two confrontations of that fateful day, a meeting of moral clarity versus uncontrolled ambition. The events were more than just business squabbles. They were a microcosm of the greater, continuous conflict between innovation and tradition, between the old guard and a new generation that was eager to reshape the future. Everyone had to face the fact that their individual goals and weaknesses were inextricably tied to the fate of the business they all claimed as their own, from the stoic Carter to the once untouchable Ridge, from the resolute Steffi and Taylor to the disillusioned Brooke. The legacy of that day started to solidify in the aftermath as the earlier cacophony of furious confrontations gave way to quiet discussions. The board members began discussing reforms that would guarantee the Forrester empire could withstand the storm of internal strife, since they were more conscious than ever of the delicate balance between power and principle. For those who felt that true leadership required more than ambition, that it took the fortitude to stand up for what was right, even if it meant confronting the established quo, Carter's voice, which was still ringing with the clarity of his views, became a rallying cry. Ridge, meanwhile, withdrew into self-reflection, compelled to reconsider the choices that had led him to this pivotal moment. If only briefly, his uncompromising facade had broken, exposing a man struggling with the high price of his own ambitions. The events of the day, which were characterized by unadulterated passion and unvarnished realities, had the potential to change both the environment of Forrester Creations and the lives of its residents. It was anticipated that the controversy surrounding the altercations would lead to more conversations within the organization as well as among fans who had been following the Bold and the Beautiful storyline for a long time. The audacious actions of Steffi, Taylor, Carter, and even Ridge indicated that the days of silent compliance were over in a world where allegiances may change at any time and every secret had the potential to spark a revolution. Rather, a new era was dawning, one in which the future of a storied family business as well as individual fates would be decided by honesty, responsibility, and the courage to confront hard realities. In the high-stakes world of Bold and the Beautiful, every confrontation, every secret whispered, and every act of defiance was a step toward an uncertain but fiercely determined future, where every character would have to fight for their legacy, their identity, and ultimately, their redemption. As a result, the echoes of these must-watch moments continued to reverberate as the sun set on that turbulent day. Carter Walton had always prided himself on his calm, measured approach to every challenge that came his way at Forrester Creations, but the pressure had been mounting for years until one fateful day, when the weight of betrayal, unrecognized sacrifices, and mounting responsibilities finally became too much to bear, and in that single, soul-crushing moment, Carter reached his breaking point. For years, he had been the steady hand guiding the company through turbulent times, acting as the legal guardian, the moral compass, and the unsung hero who smoothed over the endless interpersonal conflicts and corporate scandals that had become part and parcel of the Forrester legacy. Yet, as the years wore on, the relentless barrage of family feuds, unethical power plays, and personal betrayals began to chip away at his resolve. Every time Ridge's ambitious schemes threatened the very foundation of the family empire, every whispered conversation that questioned his loyalty, every time Brooke or Steffi, or even someone from the next generation, cast a skeptical glance his way, it added another weight to the already crushing burden on his shoulders. Carter had always maintained that his silence and restraint were virtues that set him apart from the emotional chaos that plagued those around him, but as the days turned into months of constant turmoil, he found himself questioning whether his unyielding commitment to duty was worth the personal cost. He remembered the early days when his passion for justice and integrity had driven him to join Forrester Creations, a company renowned not only for its dazzling fashion but also for the deeply entwined personal stories of love, betrayal, and redemption that played out behind closed doors. Back then, every challenge was met with determination, every setback transformed into a lesson learned. Over time, however, the relentless cycle of exploitation, backstabbing alliances, and the ceaseless demands of a family legacy that cared more about power than people had left him feeling isolated and unappreciated. In countless board meetings, while others exchanged pleasantries and flattery, Carter had stood firm, methodically pointing out the flaws in proposals, the risks of unsound strategies, and the ethical compromises that were being made in the name of progress. His interventions, though often delivered in a calm, unassuming tone, carried an intensity born of years of suppressed frustration. Yet no one seemed to care about his sacrifices. His warnings were dismissed as overly cautious or even pessimistic, while the more charismatic figures around him were celebrated for their bold decisions, no matter how reckless they might be. It wasn't just the professional challenges that wore him down, it was the personal betrayals, too. Friends who had once relied on him for wise counsel began to take his loyalty for granted, and even those he cared for seemed more interested in furthering their own ambitions than in acknowledging the quiet heroism of his steady presence. Each time he witnessed yet another instance of the Forresters' infighting, Ridge's dangerous gambles, Brooke's manipulative schemes, Steffi's emotional roller coasters, Carter felt his faith in the integrity of the family and the company slip further away. On that day, the final straw came unexpectedly during a high-stakes meeting where an announcement was made about a controversial merger that would drastically alter the company's future. As voices clashed over strategic decisions, Carter watched in dismay as his colleagues prioritized personal gain over the legacy they had all once sworn to uphold. The conversation was peppered with careless remarks and blatant disregard for the long-term repercussions of the decision. When one of the key players nonchalantly suggested that ethical considerations were merely obstacles to be overcome in the relentless pursuit of profit, Carter's restraint shattered. In a moment that felt both inevitable and tragic, he finally exploded, not with the fury of a man who had lost his temper, but with the quiet resignation of someone who had borne the weight of injustice for too long. His voice, usually so measured and calm, rang out with an urgency that silenced the room. How many more sacrifices must be made before someone cares about integrity? That single question, laden with years of suppressed pain, reverberated throughout the meeting. It was a question that challenged not only the immediate decision at hand but the very principles upon which Forrester Creations had been built. In that moment, Carter no longer felt like the silent observer, the dependable voice in the background. He felt like a man betrayed by the very system he had devoted his life to, a man whose patience had run dry after enduring endless rounds of hypocrisy and greed. As the echoes of his outburst faded into a heavy silence, the board members looked at him with a mixture of shock and regret. Some saw in his eyes the weariness of a man who had given everything only to be repeatedly let down by those he trusted. Others saw a spark, a fleeting glimmer of the fierce determination that had once driven him to stand up for what was right. Yet, for Carter, that moment marked a turning point. He realized that his breaking point was not a sign of weakness, but a declaration that he could no longer continue to serve as the scapegoat for the Forresters' relentless ambition. He understood that if he did not reclaim his own self-respect, then the legacy he had fought so hard to protect would be doomed to crumble under the weight of unchecked egos and moral decay. The revelation was bitter. Every compromise he had made, every silent concession, had led him to this inevitable juncture. In the days that followed, Carter's outburst became the subject of hushed conversations and discreet glances among the company's inner circle. Some wondered if his actions would force a much-needed reckoning within the Forrester empire, while others feared the fallout might trigger an even deeper crisis. For Carter, however, the path forward was now painfully clear. He began to re-evaluate his role within the company, questioning whether he could continue to be the moral arbiter in a world that had lost sight of its values. In the quiet moments after the meeting, as he sat alone in his office surrounded by files and faded photographs of better times, Carter grappled with the enormity of his decision. The weight of his responsibilities had always been immense, but now it felt like an unbearable burden that threatened to crush his spirit. Yet even amid the despair, there was a glimmer of hope, a realization that his breaking point might be the catalyst for profound change. He began to envision a future where his voice would not be silenced by bureaucracy or overshadowed by brash ambition, a future where integrity, transparency, and accountability would once again be the cornerstones of Forrester Creations. Determined to seize that future, Carter resolved to stand up not just for himself, but for the values he believed in. He started by meticulously reviewing every decision, every document, and every transaction that had led to the current crisis. With each discovery, his resolve grew stronger. He began to draft proposals that would reform the company's governance, aiming to create a system where ethical considerations were paramount. Carter reached out to a select group of trusted colleagues, those who had always believed in a higher standard of leadership, and together, they began to lay the groundwork for a new era at Forrester Creations. Though the road ahead promised to be fraught with resistance and uncertainty, Carter knew that change was not only possible, but essential. His breaking point, painful as it had opened his eyes to the systemic issues that had long been ignored. It was a call to action, a summons to rebuild the company from the ground up, to forge a legacy that would be defined not by opportunism or self-interest, but by the timeless principles of honesty and responsibility. In that solitary moment of clarity, Carter made a silent vow: he would no longer allow his life to be dictated by the whims of those in power. He would be the guardian of a legacy that truly honored the efforts and sacrifices of every individual who had ever believed in the promise of Forrester Creations. With that commitment burning in his heart, Carter began to chart a new course, one that might ultimately lead him away from the familiar halls of the company he had served for so long, or perhaps transform it from within, ensuring that the future would be built on a foundation of integrity. His breaking point, once seen as a moment of vulnerability, was now reinterpreted as the birth of a new vision. And although the challenges that lay ahead were daunting, Carter found solace in the belief that every ending heralds a new beginning. In the echo of his own words, in the quiet resolve of a man who had finally refused to be silenced, there was the promise of redemption, not just for himself, but for an entire legacy on the brink of transformation.